Kaley Cuoco is an Emmy-nominated actress who's best known for her roles in TV shows like 8 Simple Rules, Big Bang Theory, and The Flight Attendant.
Yeah, now she's back.
For years, the world thought it had Kaley Cuoco figured out, the sweet girl next door, the sitcom favorite, the safe Hollywood star.
I can't believe we're here. There's a lot of people behind the scenes that have made this possible, and I don't know, I'm just very grateful.
But something has changed, and fans are noticing it fast. At 40, Kaley Cuoco is no longer playing small. Her recent photos are bold, her presence is louder, and her confidence feels unfiltered. Is Kaley Cuoco sending a message Hollywood cannot ignore? You already feel there is a story behind the confidence, and you already want to know what finally pushed her to stop holding back. The image everyone accepted. For more than a decade, the public thought it understood Kaley Cuoco. She was seen as the cheerful, approachable star who made laughter look effortless. That image was shaped largely by her role as Penny on The Big Bang Theory, a character that became deeply familiar to millions of viewers around the world. Penny was warm, funny, and relatable, and over time, those traits became attached to Kaley herself. The line between role and reality slowly blurred until many people could no longer separate the actress from the character she played. Hollywood embraced that version of her because it was safe and dependable. She became the face of comfort television, someone audiences welcomed into their homes week after week. Her presence felt familiar, reliable, and emotionally easy to accept. Interviews reinforced the same tone. Photo shoots leaned into a friendly, polished look. Red carpet appearances rarely strayed far from what fans already expected. The image worked, and because it worked so well, it stayed. But success can quietly turn into a limitation. As the years passed, Kaley grew older, wiser, and more aware of the space she occupied in the industry. She was no longer just a performer showing up for lines and laughs. She was a professional with influence, experience, and sharp instincts about her own potential. Yet the public image remained frozen in an earlier chapter. The industry kept presenting her as the same familiar figure, even as her real life continued to evolve in ways that no longer fit that narrow frame.
If we started living together, I wouldn't be able to keep my hands off you.
There was also pressure to be endlessly liked. Staying approachable meant avoiding extremes. Being relatable meant not changing too much. Any shift risked confusing an audience that felt a sense of ownership over the version of her they had grown attached to. Expectations formed quietly, but firmly. For a long time, Kaley accepted that trade-off. She understood the value of patience. She knew timing mattered, and that sudden change often met resistance. Behind the scenes, however, she was learning, watching, preparing. She observed how long-term careers were built and how easily they stalled when growth was ignored. She saw how actors who remained trapped in one image often struggled to redefine themselves later. The accepted image gave her stability, but it also gave her motivation. It became the foundation she would later stand on, not the ceiling she would live under. This chapter of her life was not about being stuck. It was about gathering strength quietly. The familiar smile, the steady presence, and the trusted image all served a purpose. They bought her time, security, and creative freedom. While the public believed they already knew her, Kaley was slowly preparing for something more. She was learning who she was beyond what people expected, building confidence beneath the surface. The image everyone accepted was real, but it was not complete. It reflected one part of her, not the whole story. And in time, she would begin to show the rest, not through rejection of the past, but through growth beyond it. And when she finally decided to shift the picture the world had accepted for so long, the contrast would be impossible to miss. Fame, pressure, and quiet limits. Fame came early for Kaley Cuoco, and once it arrived, it never truly slowed down. By her mid-20s, she was already a constant presence on television, recognized everywhere she went, and deeply associated with one of the most successful shows of her generation. With that visibility came opportunity, financial security, and influence. But it also came with rules that were rarely spoken out loud. The industry rewarded familiarity, and the more successful she became, the tighter those expectations grew around her image. The visibility that every well-known person gets meant that even the minutest detail was under scrutiny. Her clothes, the way she talked, her aging process, even her emotional changes. All these became topics for the public to discuss. There was an unwritten rule of sorts that she would always be the character, the version that the viewers found it easy to accept. Change was tolerated, but only in small doses that could be easily managed. Anything too radical would bring pushback, confusion, or criticism. The glitter of fame gave her stability and protection, but at the same time, it limited her freedom to experiment, evolve, or redefine herself. As the seasons of The Big Bang Theory went on, Kaley's professional worth climbed to the top of the chart. She was one of the highest-paid actors in the TV industry, which was a clear indication of her importance to the success and cultural impact of the show. However, this success also came with a burden. The role Penny that she had taken was so much loved that it became hard for people to view the actress in a role apart from the character she portrayed. The traits of Penny, her personality, fashion, and feelings followed Kaley outside of her working life, and they were all part of what controlled her behavior in the real world. Moreover, what was happening in her personal life became public knowledge almost immediately. She went through relationships, breakups, and life changes, all of which were analyzed and debated in the media, often without the proper context and compassion. Sometimes private affairs turned out to be the headlines. Emotional experiences were transformed into the sort of entertainment that everyone would like to see. That high level of exposure can make self-expression feel like a risky business. Each decision turns out to be permanent, as there are millions of onlookers who are ready to have an opinion on it. For a long time, Kaley has been very thoughtful in her approach and has managed to walk the tightrope of fame by opting for balance instead of confrontation and stability instead of radical change. The limits placed on her were not direct, but through a constant suggestion. The stylists could impose the safe but pretty looks, which were agreeing with her already established image. The questions from the media remained predictable and superficial. Often, the admiration was accompanied by conditions. She was honored for her unchanging character, not for a gradual change. The statement that comfort was more valuable than growth was quietly sending the wrong message that upheld her boundaries. However, something different was going on with those limitations. Kaley was on the alert. She was making a distinction between public expectation and personal truth. She was beginning to realize that long-lasting popularity comes with more than just the audience's approval. It comes with self-awareness, emotional clarity, and the courage to, in the end, shift your position. So, even if the metamorphosis were slow and for the most part unseen, it was still forming. The period of pressurization was not an empty period of time. It was a trial run. Each expectation brought enlightenment about what she was no longer wishing for. Each limit made it clearer what she considered to be the most important value. The very atmosphere that was trying to keep her the same was also doing the opposite. That is, it was preparing her for the change. By mastering the survival of the fittest in the narrowest of boundaries, she also got to know how and when she would eventually exit the boundaries. And while the world still saw a familiar image, the foundation for change was already being built. That internal shift would soon find its way to the surface, in ways no one could ignore. Style turns into a statement. When Kaley Cuoco began stepping onto red carpets in recent years, longtime fans sensed a shift before they could fully explain it. The familiar warmth was still there, but her presence felt stronger, more intentional, and more grounded in self-awareness. What once looked carefully safe now carried quiet authority. Her style was no longer about fitting expectations or maintaining a comfortable image. It had become a statement of control, signaling a woman who understood her identity and no longer felt the need to dilute it. The change did not happen all at once. At first, it appeared in small details that gradually built into a larger pattern. Sharper silhouettes replaced softer shapes. Bolder cuts took the place of predictable designs. Fabrics caught the light and demanded attention rather than blending into the background. Each look felt chosen with purpose rather than habit. Stylists leaned into structure instead of softness, strength instead of comfort. Kaley stood taller, posed differently, and met the cameras with calm certainty rather than polite restraint. What made these moments stand out was not shock, but clarity. She was not trying to surprise anyone or chase headlines. She was showing who she had become. The red carpet turned into a space where she expressed confidence without explanation. There was no need to justify a daring neckline, a strong silhouette, or an unconventional design choice. Her posture said everything. She was comfortable, present, and fully in charge of how she wanted to be seen. Fashion coverage quickly picked up on the shift. Outlets praised her evolution and highlighted her willingness to take risks that felt authentic rather than forced. Side-by-side images of her earlier appearances and her current looks circulated online, drawing attention to the contrast. The conversation was no longer about whether she could pull it off. It was about how naturally she owned it. The narrative shifted from curiosity to respect. These style choices also reflected something deeper. Kaley was no longer dressing to protect an image or avoid criticism. She was dressing to reflect her inner growth and emotional confidence. The strength she had built quietly over the years was now visible on the surface. Each outfit reinforced the same message. She was done shrinking herself to remain familiar or easy to categorize. Fans responded with enthusiasm. Many admired her fearlessness and admired the way she embraced visibility without apology. Others found inspiration in her refusal to fade into the background as she entered a new stage of life. Even mixed reactions served a purpose. They confirmed that she was no longer invisible or predictable. She was present, and she was being noticed on her own terms. This transformation in style was not about chasing fashion trends or reinventing herself for attention. It was about alignment. Her outer image finally matched her inner confidence. The red carpet became less of a performance and more of a reflection. Instead of playing a role, she was simply showing up as herself, and that authenticity made every appearance feel powerful without needing to be loud. And just as the public was adjusting to this powerful new presence, Kaley took that same confidence beyond controlled appearances and into her most personal space yet. Social media without filters. When Kaley Cuoco turned to social media, the shift in her confidence became even clearer. Unlike red carpet appearances, which are carefully planned and styled, her online presence felt personal and intentional. The photos were not overly polished or distant. They felt direct, relaxed, and honest. For the first time, fans were not just seeing an image crafted for public consumption. They were seeing comfort in self-expression, a woman choosing to share herself without the pressure of perfection. Her posts began to carry a different energy. Outfits were bold, but never forced. Poses felt natural, rather than arranged for approval. Lighting was sometimes raw, sometimes soft, but always real. She shared moments that felt lived in, not staged for effect. There was a quiet confidence in allowing imperfections to exist without apology. She did not try to smooth every edge or hide every flaw. Instead, she let authenticity become part of the aesthetic. The most remarkable thing was the absence of any explanation. Kaley did not use lengthy captions to justify her choices or to reveal her thought processes. She allowed the pictures to communicate for her. This silence was very effective. It indicated self-assurance rather than isolation. She was aware of her identity, and she did not require approval to substantiate it. At a moment in life when a lot of public characters start to hide from the limelight or become more careful with their image, she was still like a light that shone gracefully and steadily with emotional stability and calmness. The fans had a very strong reaction. The comment sections were full of praises, support, and thanks. Lots of people considered her posts as a sign that confidence could not only grow with time, but also that it would not fade away. Others thought that being strong without trying to conform to impossible standards was a big coming out. These pictures were widely distributed not because of their shocking or dramatic nature, but due to the fact that they were relatable and very empowering in a quiet way. People could see themselves in her style of living. Similarly, social networks became the platform where Kaley combined her traits of boldness and being a warm person. She not only posted pictures of herself looking great and full of confidence, but also shared some of her daily life, quiet routines, and moments she spent out of the limelight. Kaley was a workaholic, but she was also resting. She was ambitious, but she was also very comfortable. This balancing act was what made her presence feel down to earth. She was neither portraying a dream nor being on the lookout for appreciation. She was communicating the truth, but through the lens of self-esteem, rather than through the lens of insecurity. Such a treatment indeed opened up a whole new picture of her, and the public was viewing her from a totally different perspective. She was no longer merely a familiar face from the screen or a well-groomed red carpet regular. Instead, her portrayal became that of a human being whom the audience could relate to. a woman who had the power to control her story, deciding when and how she should be portrayed. And the same message was being sent out with every post. She had no problem taking up her space without either being overly silent or being dramatically visible. Kaley's taking up the honesty route rather than that of perfection turned her social media into a personal growth tutor. It became a matter of presence rather than performance. It was less about preserving a facade and more about revealing one's identity. Through this, she also communicated to the audience that confidence does not need the likes of approval, applause, or even the slightest explanation. It only calls for self-acceptance and the courage of being the real you. That freedom online would soon mirror deeper changes happening beyond the screen, pushing her into an even more powerful chapter of her career and life. Reinvention beyond acting. As the public focused on her evolving image, Cuoco was quietly redefining her career behind the scenes. This phase of her life was not driven by appearance, but by intention. While attention centered on how she looked or how she carried herself, the real transformation was happening in the choices she was making professionally. She was no longer content with simply stepping into roles created by others. She wanted a voice in the stories being told and the way they were shaped. Producing became a turning point. It gave her a level of control she had not fully experienced before. Instead of waiting for opportunities to arrive, she could now create them. This shift changed her relationship with her work. She was no longer limited to characters that matched an old image or expectations from earlier in her career. She could choose projects that reflected depth, complexity, and growth. That freedom allowed her to explore material that challenged her creatively and emotionally. The confidence seen in her public presence was mirrored in the decisions she made professionally. Her project choices began to signal a change. She gravitated toward roles that carried weight, vulnerability, and tension. These were not designed to maintain comfort or familiarity. They were chosen to stretch her range and redefine how audiences saw her. Each performance added distance between her past image and her present identity. She was no longer playing it safe. She was exploring uncertainty, emotional risk, and layered storytelling. Industry perception shifted as well. Kaley was no longer viewed solely as a sitcom star or a familiar face from earlier successes. She earned recognition as a serious creative force, someone with vision, discipline, and long-term perspective. Colleagues and collaborators spoke about her work ethic and clarity. She was involved, engaged, and deliberate in her choices. That level of involvement changed how she was respected within the industry, not just as talent, but as a leader and decision-maker. This reinvention was gradual, not loud. There were no dramatic announcements or forced pivots. Instead, it unfolded naturally as her confidence grew. She trusted her instincts more and worried less about how change would be received. Success was no longer measured by approval, visibility, or numbers alone. It was measured by alignment with her values and sense of purpose. What made this stage powerful was its authenticity. Kaley was not abandoning her past or rejecting what had made her successful. She was building on it. The skills, discipline, and visibility she gained earlier became tools for expansion rather than limitations. She used what she had earned to create space for who she was becoming. Reinvention can be risky, especially when comfort is already secured. Many people choose to stay where they are once stability is reached. But Kaley understood that staying still carried its own risk. Growth required movement, even if that movement challenged expectations or disrupted familiar patterns. By stepping into roles behind the camera and shaping narratives from within, she reclaimed ownership of her career. This chapter proved that her confidence was not surface level or dependent on attention. It was rooted in purpose, intention, and the courage to evolve. And as her professional life aligned with her personal growth, her presence became stronger, clearer, and impossible to ignore. The next chapter reveals how that inner strength began to shape every aspect of her public life. Personal strength, public confidence. The confidence Kaley Cuoco carries today did not appear suddenly. It was built slowly through experience, pressure, and self-reflection over many years in the public eye. Each stage of her career brought new expectations, new scrutiny, and new challenges that required her to adapt without losing herself. Early success gave her visibility, but it also placed her under a level of observation few people experience. Learning how to exist within that spotlight became part of her emotional growth. Living such a visible life meant that even private moments often became public conversation. Relationships, emotional setbacks, and personal changes were examined from the outside, sometimes without understanding or patience. There were times when her life seemed to belong more to headlines than to herself. Over time, Kaley learned which voices mattered and which did not. That clarity became a source of strength. She stopped reacting to every opinion and focused instead on her own sense of balance, emotional health, and long-term well-being. This inner shift changed how she carried herself. Her confidence became quieter but stronger, less about being seen and more about being grounded. She no longer felt the need to prove anything or fit into a specific mold. Instead, she embraced self-trust. That trust showed up in her posture, her tone, and her presence. She appeared grounded, not guarded, calm, not cautious. The change was subtle but consistent, and it reshaped how she moved through both professional and personal spaces. Public confidence, in general, is often interpreted as the sole characteristic of a bold person. But in this instance, Kaley's confidence was the result of experiencing tranquility. She did not try to chase her younger self or seek the approval of her future self. She accepted who she was at this point of life. This acceptance granted her permission to be the true Kaley wherever she was, be it on screen, at a movie premiere, or even on social media. The continuity in her being made it hard for others to tell whether her confidence was genuine or just situational, and thus dependent on external affirmation. The fans could sense this emotional change as vividly as her physical shift. A good number of them did not merely address her facial appeal, but rather her overall aura, which they felt had changed for the better. There was a lightness in her looks, a freedom in her decisions, and an evenness in her interaction with others. Her confidence was no longer a performance for her. She was actually living it, and the difference was acutely perceived by those who had been there through her ups and downs. This power also enabled her to set limits. She became choosier with her time, energy, and commitments. She was no longer trying to meet everyone's expectations by exhausting herself. Instead, she chose to do what was good for her and what she valued personally. This choice not only fortified her ground, but also made her public appearances seem genuine rather than mandatory. The next chapter reveals why her recent images resonated so deeply and why they mean more than surface-level attention. Why these pictures matter. The reason the recent pictures of Kaley Cuoco captured so much attention goes far beyond appearance. These images matter because they represent ownership, not shock, not rebellion. Ownership of self, presence, and choice. They reflect a woman who understands her value and is no longer interested in shrinking to make others comfortable or fitting into expectations that were never designed to support growth. In an industry that often pushes women to soften, fade, or stay familiar with age, Kaley's visibility sends a clear message. She is not chasing approval or trying to recreate the past. She is standing firmly in the present, rooted in who she is rather than who she used to be. The confidence seen in these pictures feels grounded, not performative. It comes from alignment rather than effort, from self-trust rather than public validation. What makes these images especially powerful is timing. At 40, many public figures are subtly encouraged to step back, shift into safer roles, or become less visible altogether. Kaley did the opposite. She stepped forward with clarity and ease. These photos show comfort in her own skin, not a need to compete, compare, or reclaim relevance. That choice alone challenges long-held expectations about how women are supposed to age in the spotlight. Fans replay these images because they recognize something deeper than aesthetics. They see self-acceptance. They see freedom. For many viewers, the pictures offer permission to embrace growth without apology or fear. They show that confidence does not have an expiration date, and that presence can grow stronger with experience rather than fade with time. Yes, the narrative has finally changed. The actress was usually associated with roles and relationships, or simply with external milestones. Others were the ones through whom she was defined. But now the narrative has changed to focus on her agency. Rather than being interpreted, she is defining herself. Rather than reacting to others, she is telling them what she wants. This distinction implies an enormous change because it moves her from being the subject to being the author of her own image. The photographs do not call for attention. They would rather suggest it. There is no such thing as explanation, defense, or performance. She is not asserting confidence. It is just that she is being confident. That naturalness is what vibrates the strongest with the audience. It is a feeling that is both honest and deserved, and it is a kind of presence that comes from a very intimate acquaintance with oneself, rather than from simply portraying an image. Eventually, these photos are significant since they are the records of an episode of lucidity. A woman totally sure of her character and her social position is the one they portray. It is not about exposing more. It is about being less covered. And as this chapter closes, one thing becomes clear. The final part shows how this confidence shapes the future she is building now. The chapter she is writing now. At this stage of her life, Kaley Cuoco is not looking backward or trying to redefine her past. She is focused on what she is building now, and that focus shapes every choice she makes. The confidence that shows in her recent appearances is no longer something she is discovering or testing. It is something she is living with intention, consistency, and quiet assurance. There is a sense that she no longer feels the need to prove anything to anyone, because she is comfortable with where she stands and where she is headed. This chapter is marked by clarity. Kaley knows what matters to her and what does not, and she no longer wastes energy negotiating with expectations that no longer serve her. She chooses projects carefully, protects her personal space, and shows up only where she feels aligned with her values. That selectiveness is not distance or withdrawal. It is discipline. It reflects a woman who understands the true value of her time, her attention, and her emotional investment. She is no longer available to everything, and that is exactly what makes her presence more meaningful when she does appear. Creatively, she continues to expand her influence in ways that feel intentional, rather than reactive. Her involvement behind the scenes remains strong, allowing her to shape stories that reflect growth, resilience, and real emotion. She is no longer interested in being predictable or repeating the roles that once defined her public image. Each new project feels like a step forward, not a repetition of what came before. That forward motion keeps her presence fresh and respected, not because she is chasing relevance, but because she is creating it on her own terms. Publicly, her confidence feels settled rather than performative. There is no rush to explain or justify her choices, no urgency to respond to every headline or opinion. She allows moments to exist without constant commentary. That silence signals comfort. It shows that she is not seeking reaction or validation, only expression. Her presence feels steady rather than reactive, grounded rather than defensive. Kaley Cuoco's journey shows that confidence has no timeline and growth has no limits. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like this. And don't forget to check out the next video on your screen for another untold Hollywood transformation.